Head P, Ministry of Home Affairs. Mr. Murali Pillai.
Madam, I beg to move that the total sum to be allocated for Head P of the estimates be reduced by $100. The Singapore Home Team enjoys high levels of trust and confidence among Singaporeans. Why is this so? Principally, it is because our Home Team continues to deliver on the promise to make Singapore safe and secure. This is achieved despite significant operational challenges. As parliamentarians, we need to ensure that our Home Team is provided with sufficient resources and legislative levers so that they will be in a good position to deliver on their mission. In my speech, I'll focus on two areas. First, providing better support to the Commercial Affairs Department, our premier white-collar crime buster in the fight against complex white-collar crime. And two, reviewing the effect of the death penalty as a deterrence against drug trafficking, murder, and other serious crimes. Turning to the first topic, we have seen a significant increase in complex white-collar crime cases in Singapore, which are being investigated by the CAD. Several examples, some of which are gleaned from the CAD's Annual Report 2020-2021, include the fraudulent billion-dollar investment scheme by nickel trading companies, trade financing fraud involving several oil trading companies that has left banks with a combined exposure reported to be about US $3.5 billion, and numerous cases of misconduct in the stock markets. Some of these cases have been unearthed because of the economic downturn caused by COVID-19 pandemic. In other words, if not for the pandemic, the fraudulent conduct could have carried on without detection. Needless to say, such cases affect the reputation of Singapore and her financial system. These perpetrators must be dealt with firmly by the law. But one thing astonishes me. What makes these people think they can get away with their offending conduct in Singapore? The scale and nature of these crimes show that this is daylight robbery, not a thief in night. Everybody knows we have tough laws. People convicted of serious white-collar crimes are imposed deterrent sentences. But why do these crimes worth several billion dollars still happen with some regularity on our shores? It seems to me that one issue we have not yet nailed is detection. A good number of these fraudsters think that their acts will not be detected. Is there any basis for this sort of thinking? If there is, we better make sure that we address this expeditiously. We need a framework that will enable white-collar crime to be detected as early as possible. These persons must get the message that if they do the crime, they will be detected and they have to pay a high price. How can we do this? I note there are already established strategies such as leveraging on data analytics to process suspicious transactions reports, cash movement reports, cash transaction reports by institutions and individuals in Singapore, as well as deepening of intelligence capability through partnerships. I support these strategies. One suggestion I wish to make is to have a whistleblowing legislation that not only protects whistleblowers from recrimination, but also incentivizes them should the information they provide lead to successful prosecution and recovery of ill-gotten assets. This is not a new idea. Other financial centers, such as US and UK, have such legislation. I've made the same suggestion in the past. The reality is that the white-collar crime criminals obviously commit their acts in secrecy. What we see in the open is not robbery, but a legitimate front. The real underbelly can only be exposed through insiders. Insiders are not likely to volunteer information unless their interests are protected. I know this is a separate matter from providing incentives, but in a risk-benefit calculus, the benefit may not be just mere protection. We are incentivized by way of rewards too. Another suggestion I have is to review the role of external auditors in order that they are in a better position to detect fraud in companies and report the matter to CAD. Honourable members may be familiar with the German Parliament's investigation of the shortcomings of the Wirecard's auditors. By the way, CAD has investigated Wirecard too, which involves alleged losses of more than 1 billion euros, and prosecution in Singapore is currently afoot. The report concluded that the auditor did not maintain sufficient professional skepticism, and this led to it accepting documents and instructions without sufficient scrutiny. There must be better alignment between the auditor's role currently and the investing public's expectations. Next, we need to decisively tackle the problem of resourcing. I suggest we beef up manpower internally and be more open to engaging other experts from the outside. CAD is operating in a challenging environment on a day-to-day basis. Despite that, it's doing a very good job in bringing offenders of complex white-collar crime to book. As legislators, we need to ensure that CAD is sufficiently resourced so that investigations into complex white-collar crime are conducted fully and with due dispatch. The faster the criminals are prosecuted, the stronger the message of deterrence will be against like-minded offenders in the future. CAD faces a manpower constraint. After all, its officers continue to be highly sought after in the private sector. We must acknowledge this and pay our CAOs as close as possible to their market value. It's the government's responsibility to ensure adequate resourcing to deal with criminality. I heard laments about problems in recruiting people as IOs. With respect, this is not an answer I accept. The government must try harder. I now move on to the second point of my speech, which deals with the death penalty. The government's position was spelled out by the Honourable Minister on the 5th of October 2020. He said that in determining whether to apply the death penalty to a particular offence, the government takes into account three considerations in totality: seriousness of the offence, how widespread the offence is, and the need for deterrence. Applying these considerations, the main offences for which a mandatory death penalty is imposed are intentional murder, gang robbery with murder, trafficking of significant quantities of drugs, terrorist bombing, and use of firearms. The government's approach has resulted in Singapore being one of the safest places in the world, something that's deeply valued by Singaporeans. Two significant changes of the law had happened since 2013. Drug couriers convicted of capital drug trafficking offences who have been issued with certificates of substantial assistance to curtail drug trafficking activities or found to be suffering from abnormality of mind would be imposed life sentences instead of the mandatory death penalty. In addition, the death penalty will only be imposed as a mandatory sentence for intentional murder. For the other forms of murder, the court has a discretion to impose either the death penalty or life imprisonment. The minister had revealed earlier last month, that for the period of between 1 January 2013 to 11th February 2022, out of 104 accused persons, 82 who were found to be couriers and convicted as drug traffickers, 82 of them received certificates of substantial assistance, and they were imposed with life imprisonment terms. Of the remaining 22, 8 persons were imposed life imprisonments on the basis that they were suffering from abnormality of mind. The court imposed the death penalty on 14 persons. In other words, 13 persons of the persons found to be couriers and convicted of drug trafficking charges were imposed with mandatory death penalties. The impact of this law is clear. The number of persons subject to the mandatory death sentence have been reduced significantly. Nonetheless, there could be a watering down of the deterrent effect of the death penalty for drug trafficking. I therefore ask whether there's been any deterioration on the part of the Home Team's ability to keep our drug situation under check. If there's no deterioration, may I ask whether the government is prepared to consider extending the issuance of certificates of substantial assistance to cover cases where drug couriers whose death penalties have been affirmed on appeal. Most essentially, Singaporeans must continue to be convinced that the retention of the death penalty is essential for the Home Team to do its job. The fact that most Singaporeans agreed in the past does not mean that their views may not change. Outside Singapore, more and more jurisdictions have abolished the death penalty. Singaporeans' opinions can be shaped by these developments. May I ask what efforts have been made by the government to continually make the case for the continued use of death penalty in Singapore? Has there been any recent survey to measure Singaporean support? Ma'am, the Home Team's mission is one that needs constant vigilance, not only in terms of policy implementation, but its alignment with changing social norms and mores. Our officers already enjoy the trust of Singaporeans, from arresting the trend of increasing white-collar crime to deterring serious crimes such as drug trafficking. Our officers must be well-resourced, supported, and adequately compensated so as to ensure that we continue to attract the best and the brightest to take on the heavy task of keeping us safe.